Bonjour tout le monde, ça me fait plaisir.
Good day, everybody. I'm very happy to be here this morning in Canada and in Quebec City. And thanks to Gilles, especially for this, not just for that, but for the invitation. So you know me a bit. I'm John Macdonald. I'm from Australia. And I put my titles here. President Australian Men's Health Forum. It's the association which governs the national conference on men's health. And also I have the honor of being a visiting professor of public health in Palestine since perhaps 15 years. So I'll start. I'll start first with the picture of men back home in Australia. Often we see men that they take too many risks for their health and that they drive too fast and things like that. On the other hand, there are men who take risks for the health of the community, and I want to honor them to begin with. For you, it's just a picture. For us in Australia, it's reality. 10 years ago, like my son who's here, he was very young. The house was almost burned down. They came just like that. Volunteers. They took risks for us. No, I think that men are doubly unlucky. In the world of health, men suffer from this double lack of luck. Men's health has been subject, on one hand, to a biomedical look, on the other hand, a sociological look that was led by this discourse on masculinity. This is my point of view, and I hope that we'll have a discussion with you concerning this. I think these two discourses are pathologizing. Why? Medicine and sociology and their discourses on men's health are fundamentally, as far as I'm concerned, pathological, or rather pathologizing, whatever. Their starting point and their interests are the deficiencies of men, either their biological pathologies or their social pathologies. And this is what I want to talk about for the future. What I would like to present is rather a point of view which is more scientific and more caring, with more compassion. I think we need, as far as men's health is concerned, we need these two things. And I will propose that research on the determinants of health provides us with the possibility of having a perspective, a point of view, which is more scientific, more rational, and yet more full of compassion. The challenge is to have the courage to question the established wisdom and to create a new way of looking at men, and perhaps even to leave aside terminology which is no longer useful. It would be a renewal. I propose that terminology like masculinity and hegemonic masculinity have helped us in the discourse on men, but the time has come to take our distances from them and to create a new culture, another way of thinking and seeing and talking, which will be more healthy. First of all, the pathologizing point of view of medicine. It's clear, even normal, we can say, that medicine looks at what's going wrong in people, disease, in this case, the diseases of men. It's not surprising that the International Health Congress on Men that we will see once again in Vienna in the month of October this year, that they have a very strong interest on the prostate and erectile dysfunction. Here, I introduce the name Antonovsky and his word salutogenesis. I say salutogenèse in French, but whatever. The importance is the idea of Antonovsky. When doctors tell me, why do you want to introduce a new word that's so long and difficult to pronounce? My answer is, the medical world is not known for short, easy words. So if we have to make a small effort, why not? It's not difficult to understand. Antonovsky, he's an an American Israeli, who was obsessed by people who suffer the horrors of the concentration camps in Germany, especially for the Jews. And he thought, how is it possible to get out of these horrible things and to be happy people, radiant people, people who are vibrant despite everything they had in their past life. So he wondered, why are we so focused on disease, on what doesn't work, rather than being focused on what supports life, really, health itself? He created the word salutogenesis to be in opposition with pathogenesis. Everybody knows what pathogenesis is. Salutogenesis means that the medical culture and our popular cultures are more focused on disease than on health. Salus in Latin, of course, meaning health. And Genesis, it's Greek, the creation of health, salutogenesis. There's a colleague who said, no, you must not mix Greek and Latin roots. So normally, I don't know how to take it, but if we won't even talk about television, because as you all know, tele comes from the Greek and visio comes from the Latin. So I said, well, stop talking about television, because that's mixing Latin and Greek roots. But anyway, we have this pathologizing discourse of the medical world, and on the other hand, I would say the pathologizing optic of the discourse on masculinity, and I say this with a lot of respect for colleagues,
which were so nice with me, and so they really understand what I'm saying. So we have people with whom we don't agree on some of these issues, and that's okay, but I also respect their work. So I suggest that this word, masculinity, has in these last years taken negative connotations, and what's even worse is that with the attitude that it generates, the justification for so-called programs for men's health, but in fact which are not leading to salutogenesis, as we say. So what do I mean by this? Back home in Australia, up to now, when I wanted to have money for some men's programs, in order to have some money, some cash for research, but also to work in the communities, we had to talk about violence, about management of angry men, the fact that men had to be able to accept that they are sensitive people, and so on. So all that type of mindset comes exactly from these types of theories about masculinity, which fundamentally is problematic regarding men. It's not salutogenetic. So the word masculinity comes out of a sociocultural environment where there's only feminism for the equality of women. This is a fight which has benefited, of course, to all society. This is a fight which should continue, of course. This has been used by scholars, mostly in Europe, Australia, and North America, and also Quebec, I guess. Tell me if I'm wrong. But this word masculinity has acquired a negative connotation. So now we should ask ourselves if we haven't reached a point where we have to use other words instead. Kimmel. So most of the mortality causes amongst men is the result of men's behavior. This behavior is influenced by their gender, which means that men are more sensitive to some types of disease. Masculinity is one of the factors which is the most important to consider, which is associated to men's mortality or morbidity. And I don't think that this is an acceptable thing to say. In fact, masculinities, well, there are several types of masculinities in that sense. Professor Connell and his colleagues have increased our understanding of the social world, but this word keeps again, a pathogenetic definition. So those that agree with this type of men's reality also consider it only on the negative side, whatever the disease that you might suffer, whatever the cause. So they don't look first in the external world, the cause, but in its masculinity, this deficiency which is in men, which is nourished by society as well. We can talk about this. We talked about scales the other day. So here's this scale which measures the stress of men. There are 5 factors in this scale: lack of physical activities and capacity to express yourself with emotions, be oppressed by women, and so on, cardiovascular disease, and so on. So this paper focuses on cardiovascular disease on men, and it adds that most of these factors are based upon the fear of femininity, according to Keman. Once again, I don't agree with this conclusion. So what's the cause of death? Masculinity? Well, at this moment, I would like to honor Aboriginal men in Australia that often die of heart disease when they are 50. I want to honor men because they die because they are not able to feed their children. And I say this with a lot of respect towards that. There's a young man from Tunisia who burned himself lately. He burned himself this action, which was also mentioned by the media across the world in Tunisia. But he did that. Why? He was not able to feed his family. He died because of his masculinity in the negative connotation? I don't think so. I believe rather that this pathology, this masculine pathology, which would cause man's death and not injustice in society, that would be the real cause. So I think that this masculinist discourse is reactionary and conservative. This gives the permission to the medical world and to the political world to ignore the social and political causes that impact so much on health of everybody, including men. And that is the strongest argument that I want to convey. So we talk about masculinity. This helps us with medical doctors not to look into the context, the social, political context, cultural context, economical context, where live all these men. So that's my point. So I'm trying to be funny here. Could we have a scale to measure the stress amongst women? Why not? If we have a scale to measure stress amongst men, why not amongst women? Could we imagine this type of discourse, disease amongst women, where you would try to explain their deficiencies, which would be the cause of their death? So this is the type of scale for men that is considered, trying to find their pathologies because they are men. So I'm not being serious here. I'm not saying that women have pathologies or deficiencies because they're women. No, absolutely not. I don't agree with that. But should we build a complete ideology of negative femininity? I don't think so. It doesn't make any sense to think like this. So masculinity would be some type of original sin, something that needs to be changed. This looks like the original sin. So you have this hegemony in the postmodernist world, this ideology of masculinity, which is presented like a universal reality and permanent reality. We could be saved from it. In order to do that, you have to free yourself from masculinity, forget about it, and transform yourself in order to become acceptable. And I think that this is some type of negative marriage where you have this type of consideration about masculinity. And I'm talking about this medical world just to show you how this is an unhealthy perspective. This is a policy of a group of medical doctors that exists back home that are from the left, I would say. So society acknowledges that there are issues amongst men that influences health. These issues can have an origin in the process of socialization. The fact that you can be dominated in these socio-economic environments which might generate violence. Therefore, many men face issues, problems, don't want to admit and face their own issues regarding health. There's a lack of actions where they have to go and see doctors. I only have 5 minutes left. So I think that there are practical considerations. The fact that we talked about these men's pathologies or deficiencies. We talk about the beast in men, this violence which is there in them that's going to jump out of them. So who has the right to talk like that? So very quickly, we have been discussing a lot about evidence in the literature regarding health. This is a discourse that might help us to see more clearly into this question, this matter. Reading about the determinants of health, and it's too bad that I haven't heard more about these health determinants, about men, but also about women. You all know these health determinants, I hope. So here's a list, some examples of these health determinants provided by the WHO: stress, early childhood, social exclusion, working conditions, and so on, exclusion again, and so on. So these men can be sick because their hegemonic masculinity. That would be the main cause of their condition. I think that this is unacceptable as a proposal. So we could talk about the social and health epidemiology and about psychoneuroimmunology, being loved, having social support, something that fulfills your immunology system. So in Australia, let me end with this very quickly. As I've said before, the medical world, which talks about these disease amongst the men in Sydney and elsewhere, we have seen a lot of debate about masculinity, and it seems to me that masculinity, here it says the important for men is that they have to change. This is what's is being said in Australia. So here is the suicide rate in Australia, about 50 per day, only one woman. Those men that commit suicide are, as you can see here, here's the demographics. All right, so a study was made about these suicide social determinants. They have found that it's not a matter of mental illness, and not a matter of masculinity. It's the fact that they have lost their work, they have lost their spouse, and so on. These are the reasons. So all of that put together leads them to committing suicide. So once again, I think that talking about mental health in relation to masculinity doesn't help you to see the reality. It blinds you. So in Australia, we have a policy. This started with a national dialogue. They talked about these health determinants, about these services that are attractive to people, to men. Now they are not telling anymore, why don't men go see the doctor? But you could ask doctors, what do you do to welcome and attract men? And this is part of the policy. There has been a lot of opposition, but beyond the biology of masculinity. Here's the conclusion. With the Second World War, there was a movement amongst French scholars that understood that people had to leave this polarization between communism and capitalism, individualism and egoism, capitalism, and the lack of respect amongst humanity that we see in communists. This led them to develop a new philosophy, which means that the time has come for us to be interested in the well-being of boys and men of tomorrow in order to build a different philosophy, a different way to perceive men, to understand men, not talking about their deficiencies or pathologies, but rather to consider salutogenesis with these social determinants of health, with respecting the role that men play in society while facing our own contradictions. It seems to me that this is the new task that we have to accomplish. Thank you very much.